It seems I am a fairly overdramatic man. That's the only joke in this. Quite obviously, James and I will continue seeing one another. Hearing him say that so fiercely to announce to another person was such a thrill, though fairly overdramatic. What an understatement. Incredible. Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're new here. My name is Death by Pony and today we're hopping right back in to our life. So without further ado, let's go. In my eyes there would be, oh wait, we already read that. If I make the wrong step, I might hurt them, or be hurt myself. And if it's strained at all, it will break entirely. Of course, I could be entirely off the mark, and everyone else might have the same struggles. Who would know, right? Baxter smirked derisively, recalling he had an audience.
But
Still, it's frightening to want a deeper connection, because I couldn't do it. So I lived on accepting what seemed to be my reality. It was painful listening to his innermost fears and insecurities, but Baxter wasn't done reflecting. You gritted your teeth and stayed quiet. I'm old enough to have forgotten my earliest years. Everything before about 6, maybe even 7, is nothing but a vague blur. What I do distinctly recall is that as a child, I unequivocally thought I was better than other people. And those who met me were lucky, and I could pick anyone I wanted as company. The onus was on everyone else to impress. If someone was boring, or maybe I just didn't like the color that they were wearing that day, I could find a new playmate easily. After all, I had the most to offer. Naturally, what I was offering was what my parents had: a big, cool house, exciting outings, the best toys. It wasn't until I was 11 or so when I developed my first stable friends. They might not have been rich like me, but they had their own charms. Those ties couldn't be replaced. Becoming attached to other people, especially those people, made me realize what I believed wasn't true. He straightened out his back and came up to the edge of the chair. And it was so obvious that they were wonderful. I felt things I'd never had before. All it took was being who they were. It didn't matter what their parents did. No fancy venue could top genuine camaraderie with their company.
truthfully,
And for whatever reason, I was in the club and I was happy. The person who was lucky to be there was me. A beautiful sparkle sentimentality brightened his features even more than the glow of the fireplace. I had wanted my friends to feel the same way towards me, to have that kind of incredible effect on other person, for no reason other than that I was Baxter. Then the light went out. But I was older than all of them. As sheltered as I was, I got along better with kids not quite my own age. Mature, as always, Life changed fast, and then years between us came more noticeable with every day. It never reached the point where I felt like I knew what I was doing before suddenly it was as if I didn't belong with them anymore. That they didn't have to keep me around with the differences in our schedules and priorities, and I accepted that, so the friendship ended. We stopped talking as young teens, and I haven't even seen them since I left for college in 2015. I thought they didn't matter to me, but when have I done anything for them? Why did I deserve to be liked and included when all I did was want that to happen and abandon them when I didn't? None of the emotions, life was left in Baxter's retelling. He continued hollowly. I miss what it was like having real friends. I miss those friends I used to have. Someday I wonder if they remember me, or what they think of me if they do remember me. I wonder what they think of me now. But, with the flick of his wrist, he wearily brushed off the admissions. We're both aware that as a fully grown man, I learned that lesson, and many more mistakes than that. He hadn't given up the concept of vulnerability entirely, however. Baxter softened once more for an indifferent confession. I've also missed you over those 5 years. And Terry, and Miranda, and Cove, that summer and Sunset Bird, but mostly it was you who I thought of. During that trip, I did feel wanted.
You made me feel wanted and important.
It was exciting and amazing and felt impossible. It felt impossible it could last. The shine would wear off eventually. As always, I didn't want to see it happen. What have I seen pathetic for being attached to people I met on a short vacation? You had your real group of friends who lived there already. Or what have you stopped responding to me after realizing I wasn't that interesting? Or why wouldn't I have assumed there'd ever be a reason to talk to me at all once it was no longer convenient? I'm aware that's not kind way to view you, but it wasn't that you'd done something to make me believe it. It wouldn't happen. But it wasn't that you'd done something to make me believe it would happen. It's my viewpoint for every situation. You recalled the night before the wedding when Baxter admitted he dyed his hair. The problem on his night was very much the same thing. Baxter couldn't see his own value, and he had always feared that others wouldn't either. For the first time since beginning to spill out his heart, Baxter paused. He considered the way he wanted to put the next words, then he continued. Back then, during my tourist phase, we took that brief trip to the mountains. On a hike, we passed a tree that had fallen across a stream. If you can picture that, it was as if we were on the opposite sides, and I couldn't take the path to you because it looked so risky. Oh. You certainly hadn't forgotten the experience. What he said didn't line up with your memories of that day. But Baxter, that's not something you did. We just walked on it together, and then we went back to the same side. You crossed the stream bravely. That got him to chuckle ever so slightly. That was my attempt at poignant, personally relevant metaphor, but I'm quite impressed you remembered the details. He shook his head amusedly, his eyes closed, and tossed both of his hands up.
I understand.
I suppose that is the true story of my life, me not understanding a thing and getting it all wrong at every turn. Then Baxter set his attention on you completely. He wasn't playing around anymore. But rather than dancing around this, I'll say it directly. Not trying to stay in touch with you is something I've regretted for a long time. I will always regret the days I lost, even now that we've reconnected.
I'm sorry.
You understood what he was thinking, and what drove him away, why Baxter was so Baxter. At last, you could say that you actually knew him. Got up and hugged him. You reached over to take his hand, over squished into Baxter's chair with him. You stood up and kissed him. I don't know what to do. We're gonna kiss him. I feel like that's the best move. Baxter was initially confused by your sudden approach, and then flat out stunned when you held his face in your hands and pressed your lips. That's because I am apparently bolder than I thought I would be. But in the end, I think after you guys have watched me play so much of this series, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you that I like to pick the bold option. You desperately attempted to convey how strong you felt. When you parted, Baxter patted your back gently, unsure if you were sad or hurt or what. Of course, he wouldn't think your woes were for his sake. He was a silly gentleman. But it was a wonderful indulging in his warmth, and even better knowing you would have to let go again, not for real this time. Thank you for telling me, it means a lot. Sorry you had to go through that by yourself. I love you, Baxter. Very irreplaceable to me. You've always mattered and should be cared about. Congratulations on making it across the bridge. I'm glad you did it. You're irreplaceable.
You're too kind.
Thank you for saying so. I appreciate you listening to your ramblings, lover, for this long. Baxter smiled, truly moved. That was what was lost, what could never have been there all along if he had just reached for it. He accepted your words, and without buts and exceptions or wavering it off, you treasured him, and you could believe that he was starting to accept that. You could never have been happier. With Baxter's piece said and done, you both returned to your shared home. After an incredibly, exceedingly long day, you went right to sleep. The next morning, you ambled out of your room into the hall. It was so early you were bleary-eyed. Let yourself sleep in and were still tired. You slept in a lot and still could have slept more. It was nice and early and you were feeling good. You slept in a bit and were energized by it. You slept the morning away but needed it. You're finally rested. Early and feeling good. If I sleep in past 8, my day is thrown off. Let me tell you. I've been sick this last week and I've been sleeping until 9, 10 o'clock. And my day feels too short. Checking the apartment, you found the living room was empty, and so was the kitchen. Baxter hadn't come out of his room. You heard no signs of stirring either, so he probably wasn't awake. Yet, you would have been plain wrong if he'd gotten up before you. After freshening up in the bathroom, you still had the place to yourself. But there were things you could do. Packing. The trip was almost over after all. You dropped your suitcase in the bed and started to lazily fill it with bits and bobs. For all your good intentions, your head wasn't in it. Alone with your thoughts, you sank into reflecting on what happened before and imagining what could happen next. Until the sound of the door snapped you out of it. How long had it been? You had no idea. You were sure Baxter was up. Slow footsteps approached nearer and nearer, and then there was a knock. Come in. Carefully, Baxter let himself in, peeking through only half-open door. Good morning, James. Hey, morning, Baxter. I can leave you be if you're in the middle of something. Don't worry, I can do this later. You dropped a shirt you'd been haphazardly folding and joined him by the door, pushing it all the way open.
Excellent.
He gestured with a light wave, and then, clad again in fuzzy zebra print slippers, Baxter shuffled to the community space of the apartment. You followed along. He dropped like a sack of monochrome potatoes into one of the chairs. Baxter had no idea how to rush that morning, so as complacent as he wanted, which was very much. Making it out from under his blanket hadn't meant that he was ready to join the rest of the waking world. Baxter was lingering in the peaceful dreamland of his own home. You thought he was simply precious. You smiled, you ruffled his bedhead. You spoke, you poked his cheek, you flicked his nose, you kissed his forehead. Ruffle his hair. You really dug into his silky strands. With the reflexes of a sloth, Baxter brought his hand to the spot you'd gotten. The poor fool was defenseless, but you'd let him off there, feeling merciful. Baxter then curled his legs into the cushion while stretching his arms up towards the ceiling. It feels as if the wedding was a lifetime ago, not yesterday. I can't believe all happened in less than a week. It was really yesterday? Wow, you're right. It's been incredible. You snickered. You shook your head inside. Can't believe it happened in a week. He only murmured softly in response, unable to muster the energy for entire words. You took it delightfully easy while getting decent for the day. Baxter and his wide selection of lotions, oils, and creams for the sink and hair, in which you were permitted to raid as much or as little as you wanted, he made liberal use of it himself. While you were not surprised he was the kind of man with a 30-minute morning pampering. Why were you not surprised he was the kind of man with a 30-minute morning pampering routine? The two of you decided not to eat there since the cafe served plenty of food, so it was time to head out. You left the city behind, shot straight past the suburbs, and headed towards the horizon. Baxter brought the car to a stop in a small, sun-beaten parking lot. You'd arrived at the cafe you'd visited years ago. It was a bit late for breakfast, though that meant you could only look forward to a nice brunch with friendly faces. Inside, a host and the delicious scent from the kitchen greeted you. He was ready to seat you immediately. You snagged a booth with enough room for the party of 3. You passed an appropriate number of menus. Only when the host was finished and gone did Baxter take out his phone. I'll let them know we've arrived. Okay. Baxter grinned playfully, buoyed by your own positivity, and put the phone away. His attention was set on you, even if the topic wasn't. You know, Xavier is a delightful person. That's nice. You had to imagine a person would be required to be particularly pleasant and thoughtful individual to build up even a tenuous friendship with somebody as closed off as Baxter. One thing you could already give Xavier, regardless of whatever else was they had saved your boyfriend from being entirely alone before you found him again. You're grateful for it. Xavier strolled through the door shortly after a set of waters were placed down around the table. They ditched the apron that day, which made perfect sense since you were meeting up casually outside of their place of employment. Though it suited them so well, it was a staple part of the look. If Xavier had worn it out, you bet strangers would have accepted it as entirely correct anyway. Your eyes met them across the opening space of the cafe. Baxter stood to welcome them. Xavier wasted no time in linking up. Good morning. He held his hand straight out for a shake. Xavier went with it, giggling.
Always a pleasure.
Hi, Baxter and James. Thanks for finding the time to see me after all.
Oh, yes.
Of course, Xavier, of course. You and Baxter sat side by side. He rejoined you there while Xavier slid into the opposite bench. Hi, it's fantastic to see you again, you waved excitedly. You calmly. Fantastic to see you again. They shot you a grin and scooped up a third and final menu. Are you ordering anything? I am. I wanted to try one of their muffins, though I doubt it'll be better than the ones at, Zaki. They hid their face behind a wall of their own fingers and whispered in a sing-songy voice. You were like kids sharing secrets of the playground.
Absolutely.
With a smirk and an air of fox innocence, Baxter tossed his hands up. Why hadn't we gone there instead? Sadly, we don't offer good coffee or real food. It's a bakery only. Ah, of course, now I remember. Baxter chuckled over Xavier's lament, and he wasn't so professional to be above the occasional tease. And you, James? I don't want anything. I want a drink. I like drinking some food. I'll go drink with one of the pastries. Have some food with the pastry, too. And drink food and a pastry. I like a big breakfast. For a drink, I got hot coffee, iced coffee, Americano, latte, cappuccino, espresso, frappe, cup of hot tea, iced tea, hot chocolate, glass of milk, glass of juice. Actually, never mind. Hot coffee. And for the food, egg plate, egg sandwich, slice of quiche, lunch meat sandwich, hummus, veggies, a panini, breakfast burrito, bowl of oatmeal, smoothie bowl, bowl of soup, salad, yogurt parfait, burrito. For the pastry you chose, croissant, piece of coffee cake, muffin, slice of banana bread, cheese Danish, a fruit Danish, cinnamon roll, scone, cookie, a piece of cake, and a piece of apple pie, a cup of bread pudding, a bear claw. I love bear claws. We're going.
Now?
I'll be getting a cup of black coffee myself. And I believe I'll have a slice of quiche. That was a relief. He was actually going to eat this time. Since everyone had decided, the order was placed, and as soon as the waiter came by, he jotted down the request, collecting the menus, and promised to be back shortly. Then, the second he was out of earshot, Xavier shot a pining stare at the couple sitting snugly across from them.
So?
Baxter! You knew where this was going. It was easy to imagine the shock and confusion Xavier must have been stuck in until now. You refer to yourself as James' boyfriend. Is that a joke? The last time you met, you were vowing the two of you would never see each other again after the wedding. Baxter threaded his fingers together while leaning forward. He grinned cordially. There was no way to spin the sudden leap in the relationship that wasn't abysmally embarrassing for him, and he didn't care. With as much audacity as somebody could ask a baker to make a wedding cake with 3 days' notice, your good friend gave an apologetic answer.
Honestly.
It seems I am a fairly over-dramatic man. That's the only joke in this. Quite obviously, James and I will continue seeing one another. Hearing him say that so fiercely to another person was such a thrill, though fairly overdramatic. What an understatement. Incredible. Wasn't even the first time they were hearing it, but Xavier was stunned silently yet again by the news. This time, though, the conversation couldn't be ended with a tap of the screen.
What's the dynamic here?
Well, I'm happy for you both of you, but what's happening with the theatrics to begin with? They were nothing if not persistent when it came to getting the specifics. Decorators did have the eye for details. You started the funny story. You tried to explain the awkward turn of events. admitted the saddening situation he'd gone through, continued listening to Baxter recounting. Funny. Speaking animatedly through the pause of laughter, you went over how you met and how you parted and how you ultimately reunited and how difficult Baxter had made the reunion. Baxter didn't interrupt to defend himself despite the unflattering nature of the tale. He merely smiled and swept Yardy swoopy bangs. Swirling their longest strands of hair, Xavier found the whole of the story much easier to grasp than they had only heard the ending.
To be honest,
Honestly, I'm not surprised in the slightest. As pleasant as things were when you stopped by the bakery, I always assumed you had stopped having client-based reasons to visit. I always assumed if you stopped having client-based reasons to visit, you never would have spoken to me again. Looks like I was right on that assessment. Baxter's gaze dropped. He couldn't help it. Developing close ties could never make him ashamed, no matter how odd the circumstances. Doing the inverse, however, might always remain a source of guilt for him.
I apologize.
I apologize. It's not your fault. I have no talent for maintaining friendships that are entirely unavoidable, and sometimes not even then. I get it. Trust is always a work in progress, right? I'd say you would have become actual friends eventually, but James giving you a push can speed that right along. Baxter lifted his face, and at that, speaking softly, Xavier was a nice person. Yes, I think so too. Food and drinks arrived shortly. Hiller Group mutually took that as closing to the interrogation of Baxter, Ward, and James Todd. After serving the order, the waiter left once more, saying to call him if you needed anything else. Xavier and Baxter put a pause on for the discussion to sample their stuff. Though when you were here before, you'd only gotten black coffee, it was up in the air whether he'd enjoyed a meal. By their delight and hmms of the flavors, it sounded like the cafe was a hit with both. Yours was delicious too. The three of you stayed quiet until Xavier chimed in with the next major topic of this meetup, Jude and Scott, and Adam's wedding. How'd the day go? It went off without a hitch. They are a wonderfully stable couple.
woohoo!
They whistled and oohed, and the odds were beat. That was far for certain. But all accounts, you should have been informing Xavier how the last-minute preparations ended in disaster. Yes, and your cake got rave reviews from the guest, of course. Of course.
Phew!
I can sleep easily knowing I made a cake for a crowd who enjoyed it, and other couple who should always be getting married. I'm happy for them. And we'll cut that one there. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, hit like. That way I know you're enjoying the content I'm making. Hit subscribe. That way YouTube brings you back Here's Happens Next. I won't take up any more of your time. Have a good day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!